Zach, I think we're back in. Fantastic. It's nearing the end of the day, and I am just honored and thrilled to be presenting our last panel. Last but certainly not least, this is a conference at the core of it, the question of unlocking global geothermal energy, not just here in the United States, but abroad. And with that, we have an exceptional group of guests to talk about that. Just to introduce some of the talent we have here on stage, Drew Nelson, who leads Project InnerSpace's policy and strategy, the VP of Policy and Strategy. For those not aware, Project InnerSpace is an NGO. Lauren mentioned it in your presentation. An NGO really at the forefront of pushing next-gen geothermal to countries across the world, and Drew's been a seminal part of that. And Drew, thank you again for this partnership here today. And then I'll let you introduce our panelists, but it's an all-star team of geothermal leadership and also soon to be geothermal emerging players. So we're just thrilled to have representation from Kenya, from Indonesia, from the European Union, and from Germany. Drew, the floor is yours.
Great. Can you guys hear me in the back? Yeah, great. So I'm really excited about this panel. I think there's a lot of really amazing things we can talk about, but I'm also really excited to see so many people in this room, a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces, and that's probably the most exciting thing is how many people here are engaged and getting excited about geothermal. So Milo, congratulations to you and the team here at Carnegie for putting together this amazing event, and thank you very much for your hospitality and for raising the awareness of this awesome issue. And so what we're doing today, right now, in this panel, is we're kind of pivoting from the abstract of what does super hot rock potentially look like to what's happening now, and how do we get more of it up and running. And so to have representatives from two countries that are at the leading edge of geothermal in Kenya and Indonesia, and then two jurisdictions with the European Union and Germany that are very much looking forward to seeing how they can do more geothermal. I think it's an amazing mix of perspectives and ideas that I'm really excited about. So we're going to jump in with some questions for each of the panelists, but before I do that, I'm going to ask each panelist just to take a second to introduce themselves and what they're excited about on geothermal generally. So Ambassador, over to you first.
Thank you. Thank you first very much for Carnegie and the team that's behind all this, and thank you for having us here today. My name is Ambassador Christopher Kirigo from Kenya. I'm very excited about this because geothermal is a very high priority in Kenya. 50% of our power in Kenya comes from geothermal. And I'm a career banker. I've been involved in funding quite a few geothermal projects. And we look forward to partnering with you and engaging more in this important agenda.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you, Mialo, also for inviting Indonesia here. My name is Ibrani Situmorang. I'm the Minister Counsellor of Indonesian Embassy. I'm heading the economic team. Energy is not necessarily my direct policy, at least for the last 3 days. I think there are a lot of things that we have to take care. But we are excited to be here because energy is a priority issue for Indonesia, and we have alignment, including with the US in terms of potential cooperation moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Milo and Carnegie, for inviting us, the European Union. I'm Francesco Graziani. I'm Energy and Climate Counsellor at the EU Delegation here in DC. I've been here for around a year and a half. And before that, I was around 12 years in Brussels in the Director General for Energy at the European Commission. And Drew, coming to your question in really in 2 words, there cannot be a more timely discussion about geothermal energy. And not only because the European Union is incredibly invested in developing the technology and the production of heat and power coming from that, but especially from my perspective, my selfish perspective as responsible for the bilateral relationship between the EU and US on energy, there is not a single item that is more bipartisan and shared across not only the political aisle, but also the marketplace and the transatlantic cooperation standpoint that is more important right now than geothermal energy. So thank you very much. This is a great discussion.
Yeah, hi, thank you very much. Thank you, Milo, for having me. I'm Sophie Hemmer, Energy Counsellor of the Embassy of Germany. I've been here for 2 years now, but I'm only covering the energy portfolio for 6 months now, but I'm very thrilled because it's an extremely important topic, as all of my colleagues have already mentioned, and Germany is, of course, very excited about any kind of energy cooperation with the United States, and as you have mentioned before, geothermal. We agree with Milo and all his findings that there is a huge potential for geothermal in general in Germany and also for cooperation, of course.
Awesome. Well, it's not every day that you get to be on a panel with representatives from 4 countries, 2 of which are in the southern hemisphere, or straddles the equator, I guess, in one case, and 2 of which are the northern hemisphere, where the emerging economies have words of wisdom and experience on how to develop a clean energy. Too often that goes the other way. And so one of the things that I think is most cool about geothermal is Kenya and Indonesia are leading the way. They are 2 of the biggest geothermal power producers in the world. And so, Ambassador, and the same question to you when the ambassador is done, what lessons learned do you want to share with the room and with the other jurisdictions here on the panel about what has worked for Kenya, and what are some of the things that countries should be looking out for as they seek to develop more geothermal?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think from a Kenya perspective, one of the key aspects that made it possible was the government investing significantly on the development phase. So the exploration of the geothermal fields, the initial stage was picked up by the government. That enabled the government create an enabling environment for the private sector to come in and invest. Yeah? As we speak right now, Kenya has over 90% of its power mix comes from renewables. Yeah? So 90%. We've got a target of 100% by 2030. And the only way we'll be able to achieve that is through geothermal. We have a potential, currently, close to 49% of our energy comes from geothermal. And so to get the other, the 10% that doesn't come from clean energy, it's not difficult. And with 10,000 potential geothermal, 10,000 megawatts of potential geothermal, there's a huge opportunity, not just for the country, for also external private sector players, international private sector players who are keen to invest in geothermal. So Kenya provides that enabling environment, so that's one key aspect. Something that was also very key for Kenya was setting up a regulatory framework that is friendly to the private sector. So this enables the private sector get their returns back in foreign currency, but equally, it protects investor rights. That was a very important aspect. So we got a very strong PPA framework, Power Purchase Agreement framework, yeah, that is fully supported by the Attorney General, and it's a regulatory framework that holds water, and the banking community accepts it. So that was one very important aspect from a Kenya environment to make the geothermal field work very well for both the government and also for the private sector.
Wonderful, thank you. That's a great answer. Over to you.
Thank you. I think one of the first factor is, of course, the fact that Indonesia is sitting among one of the hottest spots, geologically speaking, like 40% of geothermal resources of the world. But I think natural resources alone is not enough. We are rich with a lot of things. We have summer around the year, but we are just about to develop, solar energy and everything. The same with geothermal. We, like Ambassador mentioned, Indonesia focus on strengthening the regulatory framework. Geothermal is actually probably the only source of energy that has its own law. I think after that, nuclear safety. But it's more like from a nuclear safety perspective. But geothermal has its own law since 2003. And this law has been improved in 2014, which like Kenya's experience as well, balance the rights and obligations, protects the interests of the private sectors, because energy is, like any infrastructure projects, are very costly, and private sector needs some security guarantee, and as well address cross-sectoral issues. That's why we put it at the bill level. For example, when the geothermal resources is located in a conservation area, So there are, these aspects that is addressed by our law. And the other thing is, I think like I happen to be here in the previous panel, Indonesia as well. The state starts like some drilling program, and then share the information to the private sectors that are interested. We actually established what we call the Genesis, Geothermal Energy System of Information, which is open to private sectors that wanted to understand the geological information. So based on that, they can make a decision in terms of investment and whatnots. And as well, the portal as well has a platform to start participating in tender. And the last thing I think that is important in our experience as well, the need to have a consultation with local society. I think this is what Indonesia's experience, being a democratic country. We have to always engage in order to ensure that any geothermal power plant can get approval from the local community and they can benefit from that. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
So I mean, there's a lot of really interesting themes from what was just said and what we've heard earlier in the day. Sharing of data, regulatory frameworks, strong government signals. So it's nice to have that level of continuity across the day. So Sophie, if I understand correctly, Germany actively is considering a law on geothermal heat right now. Can you share a little bit about that and how, if at all, any of these lessons learned from Indonesia and Kenya are being applied?
Yep. Thank you, of course. So there is this bill, it's a Geothermal Acceleration Act, so Geothermie Beschleunigungsgesetz, a lovely German word. And the idea is, and I think that's very similar to here in the US, one of the obstacles for the geothermal and other energy sources in Germany is permitting. So the idea is to make permitting much easier than it has been before. An important part of that is that now an overriding, or in this bill, the bill suggests that there is an overriding public interest when it comes to geothermal projects, which helps a lot to speed up projects. There are, the bill also introduces ways to de-risk the investments, and also there are programs in Germany by the KfW and Munich Re, so our investment and development bank, to de-risk the exploration risk, which drives cost up when it comes to geothermal. And another part very important, because when you talk about geothermal and other forms of energy, you need to understand a little bit the German mind when it comes to things like that. We are not known to be very risk-friendly or as open when it comes to innovation as our American friends are. So that's also a reason why in Germany we use mostly hydrothermal, geothermal, and no petrothermal ways, because the idea of hydraulic stimulation is something German people are very critical of. So an important part also of this bill is to find a way to de-risk if mining damages. To find, and that's very important if you want to have the public opinion and the society to be open to something like geothermal, because we are not very experienced when it comes to things like drilling. It's nothing Germans are, in theory, very fond of. So it's very important to have this and to give stability and certainty and clarity. But Germany sees a lot of potential when it comes to geothermal for heating. Another very important fact is that for us, geothermal so far has not been very important when it comes to power production. It only adds to 0.1% of our electricity mix. And Germany is on 60% renewables, around 60% renewable when it comes to electricity mix at the moment. But most of our heating system is district heating, 80%, and it's combined, traditional combined heating systems. And there is a huge potential for geothermal on that, because Germany, we have had a recent change of government, and as you might know, in Germany we always have coalition governments. Therefore, the swing between different governments is not as extreme as in other countries. But one particular new approach is to be a little bit more technology open when it comes to energy topics, but at the same time trying to reach our goal to be climate neutral by 2045. And geothermal is an important part of that, especially in Germany when it comes to heating, because the entire question of heating adds to a huge part or a relevant part of German emissions.
Thanks, Sophie. And just a real quick follow-up for you. We heard earlier, I think it was Lev who mentioned that the technology that his company uses requires hydraulic fracturing and stimulation. So is what you're saying about the reinsurance, does that clarify that hydraulic stimulation could be used in Germany, or is it not that clear?
No, I wouldn't go that far. I think this is a little bit of a longer process.
Okay.
That's why we are very excited that there are also new projects that don't need hydraulic stimulation, and that's also something Germany's looking into a lot.
So it doesn't go so far as to say, yes, you can proactively do it, but nor does it say you can't do it. It kind of builds some frameworks to...
No, you can't do it. It's just about the mining in general, if there are some kind of mining damages.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we do not have experience with drilling, but we do have experience with coal mining.
Yeah.
So mining damages is something German people are very aware of.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks. So one of the things that I get most excited about when I think of geothermal is the fact that it is a Swiss Army knife, which turns out doesn't have a German translation. The Italian translation is a screwdriver.
Screwdriver, yeah.
And the Bahasa Indonesian translation is a type of broom. Is that right? So idioms, who knew? But one of the things that I love about geothermal is its power, its clean industrial heat, and its residential heating and cooling. And so we've heard about the power side from our first two panelists. We've heard about the residential heating and cooling. Francesco, I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the clean heat side and kind of what is going on at the European Commission level and kind of what your plans are there.
Absolutely, and I think it is a perfect segue because I always like to introduce my points by giving some figures. So Sophie gave very kindly figures for Germany. We have very similar figures for Europe, actually, because you said 0.1. For Europe, it's 0.2% of electricity being produced by geothermal energy. While for heat, we are around 0.7%, so a bit more. And the experiences of Kenya and Indonesia are very significant in this respect, because clearly they have a very power-based approach to the use of geothermal, while in Europe, for many years, the approach has been quite towards the residential heat, basically, and clean heat for industry, that's as a new frontier. Why I say that? I say that because until now, with let's say the electrification push of the economy, in order to have increasing amounts of renewable electricity, we've witnessed a substantial shift between, let's say, power production from fossil fuels into renewable energy. And geothermal energy being, of course, part of renewable energy, and it's been like that, so it's nothing new for the European regulatory framework. We already had geothermal energy as part of the first Renewables Directive already in the years 2000, so in 2008, I think, or 2007. And then again in the second Renewable Directive, and now we are the third Renewables Directive. So let's say nothing really new there. So you might wonder, why didn't we push more for electricity? Because the European Union geography is a very, let's say, poor geography under many respects, but it's very rich in terms of solar and wind. So let's say we saw that solar and wind could cover the more, let's say, immediate electrification needs in the last 5 to 10 years. But now we need to go do more for heating and cooling, okay? So we're working now under the leadership of the new Commissioner for Energy, Dan Jorgensen. We're working on a heating and cooling strategy that will find the light of the day most likely at the end of this year already or at the beginning of next year. But the important passage here is that the heating and cooling strategy is based politically and policy-wise on the affordable energy action plan that was my commissioner's first political communication. There, he said, we have to tackle the heating and cooling sector, not only because it's something that is part of an affordable energy strategy, but also because it's key more than ever for decarbonization. Why is it key? It's key because Europe consumes half of its energy, heating and cooling represents half of Europe energy consumption, which is way more than many other jurisdictions. Why? We have very cold winters in the north, and we have very warm summers in the south. So we have to, let's say, now it's become, the heating and cooling sector has become the really low-hanging fruit for our policy. So what do we have there? Our European Geothermal Energy Council, who is like, let's say, the main lobby, if you want, in Europe that advocates for the development of renewable energy, has been very successful in putting at the center of the debate in Europe geothermal energy as a solution for not only heat but also power. So what we've seen now is that we already have around 400 district heating and cooling systems out of 5,000 in Europe that run on geothermal energy. So we're getting to almost 10%, and we intend to more than double that figure. We see that the new technologies, Sophie mentioned some of them, can actually help in having a combined heat and power cycles. So in order to find synergy between heat and power generation, we are looking into that in order to find the right visibility signals at policy level. And of course, the financing side. While we will include in our heating and cooling strategy possible strategies to have, let's say, de-risking from the public level, we are already engaged with financial institutions, with private financial institutions, in order to have private capital flock in once we are there and we are serious about the policy signals that we give at regulatory level.
Thanks, Francesco. It's really awesome. And nice to hear the de-risking in both your answer and in Sophie's answer, building on what you guys were saying earlier. So that's really nice. But is there a specific focus or any thinking that's happening within the Commission on direct use industrial heat and decarbonizing that stuff, or is it just focused on residential heating and cooling?
No, absolutely. Within the heating and cooling strategy, there will be also direct heat use for industry, which is already, by the way, part of the Net Zero Industry Act. So thank you, Drew, for drawing my attention to that. I forgot to mention it. So in the wake of the Russian aggression of Ukraine, and let's say, as part of the effort to diversify away from our main, let's say, processing jurisdiction in terms of raw materials, the Commission, one of the very last acts of the previous Commission, we still have the same president, but her first term, she really pushed a lot on having a strong component of industrial policy. Then it started with the Net Zero Industry Act, whereby certain technologies were considered strategic in order to have more affordable energy to industry. One of them being geothermal energy. So let's say we start seeing the different policies converging. It's not just energy policy, it's not just climate policy, it's not just industrial policy, it's not just security policy, it's a bit of all of this.
Geothermal is a screwdriver.
Absolutely. Geothermal as a screwdriver. I can mention another screwdriver, nuclear energy. That is another very, at least here in the US, very bipartisan. So another perfect angle to cooperate more with the US. And if you allow me, last point, the crucial part of this discussion, since we are here, is about transatlantic cooperation and the way we can really find some items that are so good to discuss and so good to progress on, and one of them being geothermal energy.
Well, that's great. I was actually going to ask that later, but since we're on topic, I'd like to invite each of you just to give a really brief remark on how do you see your country working with the United States on geothermal? Is that an avenue of cooperation? And specifically, because I think there's going to be a lot of interest on this particular question, Is there a scope of work, not a scope of work, but is there the ability to bring in any American companies, oil and gas know-how, et cetera? Probably less so for Kenya and Indonesia than it might be for Europe. But do you feel like within that answer, what does it look like to cooperate specifically on getting projects in the ground in your country?
Thank you. I'll start first on this. I think there's a lot of cooperation and synergies that can be built. The first thing is you look at the financial institutions. Start with DFC. DFC is looking to scale up big-time investment to American corporations to invest in Africa.
Yep.
Yeah. So geothermal is a good area that U.S. investors can come in and tap into. Yeah. One of the biggest aspects is what investors look for is returns. Yeah, risks, and also the risks that they're taking towards these projects. A lot of these projects, similar to what my colleague here from Indonesia talked about, risks have to be balanced between the opportunities that the investor is getting and also between the private and the public sector. Yeah? So Kenya has developed a very strong PPP Act that protects both the public and the private sector. The energy space, especially in Kenya, has well been developed over from very many years. And this has enabled, has created an environment whereby risks and returns are well balanced, yeah? Which makes it much easier for investors. So we see this as a huge opportunity to partner with US companies, and Kenya is open for that, yeah? To bring in strong US companies keen to this. And the best part about markets like Kenya, capital markets are available. Private commercial banks are available, and there's a lot of DFIs that are available to come in and put in long-term money into some of these big infrastructure projects.
Great.
So yeah,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Before I answer the question, I think I want to pick up because it will relate to your question on direct use, because there's something that we are trying to develop as well in terms of our use of geothermal energy. Of course, not for heating, because we have summer all around the year. Just a little bit dry and a little bit wet towards the end of the year.
It works for cooling, too.
Cooling.
But I mean, cooling is actually something that I learned. Maybe this is something that we have to be talking about, because we really need that, especially when during this time of the year. But what we are doing now, we are engaging on application of direct use of geothermal energy for agro industry. For example, we use it to dry our coffee, which is if you use the normal daylight drying process, it will take 1 month. And then with geothermal, it's just 1 week. And then the coffee will be on your table. So I mean, like this agro industry and then critical mineral as well that we are looking into, where we can extract from this geothermal process critical mineral that will be used, will have added value, of a strategic value, not only for energy, not only for agro-industry, but even like electronic vehicle, batteries making and whatnot. So I think these are the areas that are very interesting to develop on direct use of geothermal technology. And why I say this is a potential, because we now use like 94% up to 98% of our technology is high temperature geothermal system, while actually our geothermal sites is 71% is low to medium amplicity geothermal system. So, and we need to learn from the US on that, because US, I think, if I'm not mistaken, my colleague from Indonesian Department of Energy has like 40 years experience, correct me if I'm wrong, and have like 33% of their system is using that low to middle temperature geothermal system. So I think from that perspective alone, we can see a technical cooperation. And Ambassador has mentioned the other thing that we can work together as well is financing. Of course, geothermal and as any infrastructure project is very expensive. We want to work with USDFC, and Indonesia has just established our own sovereign wealth fund, managing about $900 billion assets, and which can be used for strategic investment. And they're interested as well to explore co-investment, co-financing in those projects. And I think this is one area that we have overlapping interests, both at policy level, technological complementarity as well. And last but not the least, I think what is interesting from the current US administration is it's a challenging one, it's a new one, but at the same time, it brings opportunity. We live like that. We live in a ring of fire. Yeah. It has to come with earthquakes, volcano, but it comes with geothermal too. So we see that, and in our discussion with many many agencies of the current administration, there's interest to sort of enhance and strengthen partnership from the lens of supply chain. So not strictly from the lens of import or export, or just transfer, but mutually beneficial. And I think this is where the discussion with the US would go, that you see this as a mutually beneficial, that having, for example, importing US technologies to Indonesia, bringing US fund along with the know-how will benefit Indonesia, but at the same time will benefit the US as well. So, and I think that is the way we try to frame our cooperation with the US, not only in geothermal area, but in other parts of our cooperation potential. And last but not the least, I think the more from the geopolitical perspective, I think for Indonesia, having more connectivity, having more alternative to supply chain is better for us. We never want to be relying on just one or two partners. We want to be, working with as many partners as possible, and then so that we'll help secure our own energy supply towards. We have ambition to grow by 8% in 2029. So we need to work together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ibrani. I appreciate it. Francesco.
Yes, probably just two examples of current and potential cooperation and one anecdote. So. What's already happening, for example, like in a big project in Utah, Farrago, if I'm not wrong the name, is what's happening there is that the main equipment that is being used to actually go ahead with the project is Italian machinery.
Yeah.
So something is already happening. We already have an existing marketplace there, where US project developers can rely on reliable partners on the other side of the Atlantic. And a potential part of cooperation that I would really love to explore more is all the good talks that the oil and gas industry here in the US has given me. Like, I learned so much in the last year and a half in understanding that when I came here, I had the idea that fracking was something that is like a sort of like anathema, okay? Because in Europe, that's where our, let's say, skin reaction to that is, this is not something that we'll never allow. What I learned in the last year and a half is that there is fracking and fracking. There is so much more advanced technology that can be deployed now in a way less intrusive way. So I would be very happy to have American companies that develop this technology. I mean, the current Secretary of Energy is there and is one of the biggest innovators in technology, in technological advancement in hydraulic fracking. So American companies should come to Europe and explain why the new systems, the new technologies are effectively, let's say, mitigating any concern that we could have in Europe, and there is a huge potential for a market for American companies. Last point, an anecdote. A couple of months ago, in the context of our Transatlantic Sustainable Transition Initiative that we managed at DC level, at the EU delegation level, we are engaged in subnational diplomacy, okay? Especially in the climate area, of course, the federal level right now is a bit more difficult to engage with. So we are going the level down. We talk to states, we talk to counties, municipalities, and so on. I was in New Mexico. And I was supposed to talk to the governor's office on several things and so on. And one of the meetings that in that beautiful state happened and was completely impromptu, thank you, was with the president of the Geothermal Association, the local Geothermal Association. I learned so much, and he was telling me of how much of need there is in New Mexico for whatever technology, and by the way, a lot of leading technology is European on the entire life cycle of the project, or a geothermal project, for European companies to be interested in going to New Mexico and find out opportunities there. And that's what's happening on the ground. So let's say it's not something that is abstract, not something that is just like a political level happening in closed doors with like a lot of smoke. No, it's something that is happening on the ground, and and we need to favor this.
No, it's an excellent point. And just real briefly before I turn to you, Sophie, to answer the question, I don't think it's lost on many people in this room that a lot of the turbines that are supplied for U.S. power projects are manufactured in Italy. And I think, particularly given the legislation that recently passed and the fact that it has foreign content questions around it, I don't know if anyone fully has wrapped their head around what that actually means. But maybe that's something coming out of this conference, is we need to figure that out. But last I checked, Italy counts as one of the good guys.
I hope we're not entities of foreign concern.
Right,
yes.
right, exactly. And Italy's not on that list, so let's take advantage of that.
Let's keep it like that.
Right, exactly. And just real briefly on New Mexico, just a couple weeks ago, my organization, along with New Mexico Tech University and the New Mexico Geological Society, published a paper looking at the vast potential of geothermal in New Mexico. And we're working on similar reports in Indonesia and maybe soon Africa as well, by the way. But one of the findings of that report is that there's few US states that have the trifecta of oil and gas know-how, hydrothermal know-how, political will, and heat. And so it's interesting that you chose New Mexico for your anecdote, because it kind of all comes together there. Sophie, transatlantic relations.
Yeah, so we have very good experience on a policy level with energy partnership with the United States, as we have with many other countries, and I see no reason why that shouldn't continue, and geothermal could be part of this discussion, because I think there are many areas where we can learn from each other, as I've mentioned before, permitting, or standardization, or many other areas on a policy level. When it comes to market opportunities in the private sectors, as Francesco has said, I've also traveled a little bit through the different states, and wherever I go to try to find out is there room for subnational cooperation, I either see German companies already investing in the United States heavily, in general, not geothermal particularly, or American companies importing German parts or technology for their work. And I think that's also true for geothermal. It could be true. And just to give you a little bit of an idea what the scale is, when I mean there is potential in Germany. At the moment, Germany operates 31 deep geothermal plants for heating, 9 for combined, and 2 for energy production. 16 are under construction, so this would always add 50% to the 31 we've already had, and 158 are on a planning stage.
Can you just go through those numbers one more time?
So 31 so we are operating 31 for heating, 9 combined, and 2 only for electricity. 16 are under construction, and 158 are planned.
Geothermal?
Yes, for heating.
Yeah,
yes.
wow.
Or
That's
in total.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Sophie.
So there is a potential for cooperation and investment.
Yeah, lots of potential there. One of the amazing things about being at this conference is there is a list of 9 really fantastic questions here in front of me. So kudos to the audience for really having some awesome questions here. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but there are a lot of really fantastic ones. Sophie, let's stick with you. Munich and Bavaria have become geothermal innovation hubs, which I did not know of, but that's awesome. What lessons can be transferred to other parts of Europe or globally?
So what I assume is meant by Munich is Geretsried, close to Munich, not as nice. The city is probably as nice as Munich, but the name is not as nice, maybe. It's a huge project, and as mentioned before, that's a very unique project for us because it doesn't include any hydraulic stimulation. There is so the model I have to say, predicts that there could be 64 megawatt for heating and 8 megawatt for electricity. So this is quite big. And the same company is already planning 2 other sites in Germany. And in Geretsried, it's, if everything goes by plan, they're supposed to produce the first electricity or to add the first electricity to the grid in the last half of this year. This being said, it is an international project. There is a lot of international investment. There is a lot of public money. It's a 400 million euro project. That's why there's, of course, also, as I've mentioned before, Germans like certainty and continuity. And we have a little bit of show me mentality, so prove it to me. And there are some skeptical voices as well who say if this would fail, of course, that would have a negative impact on the entire geothermal topic in Germany. But so far it looks really good. And we're very excited about this project.
Great, thank you. And I won't tell people about Munich about what you just said.
But I used to live in Munich, so I'm biased.
All right, another great question here, and this is for you, Ambassador. How does Kenya balance public utility involvement like Kengen and GDC's subsidiary with private investment in geothermal? And then I'm going to tack on an add-on to that, which is there's been some talk of using geothermal for data centers in Kenya. And how does that feed into the conversation?
Thank you. A very good question. We've asked that question. So, first, number one, Kenya has split all the utilities. For example, I mean the distribution, the transmission, the generation, and generation is driven by both part of the like Kengen. Kengen is it's a listed company in Kenya. So they do and bid for projects similar to with private sector, yeah. So they actually have to compete to win projects, yeah. So Kenya has made it a level playing field for both the public and private sector to participate in these projects, yeah. And when you're talking about, for example, with geothermal, technologies are constantly changing, yeah. And the people with much more advanced technology, they're able to deliver plants at a much cheaper price, yeah. So it's not always the case the public sector is able to compete with large international companies.
Yep.
Yeah. So we've created a mechanism where they compete evenly. But one thing I'll say is with our experience, especially in geothermal, Kengen has been able to export its expertise to multiple countries around us.
Yeah.
Actually, Ethiopia has recruited Kengen for the exploration, yeah? So we're looking to scale up our expertise and leverage on what we've built across Africa, yeah? Secondly, in terms of GDC will continue with its mandate. GDC is 100% owned by government. The mandate to explore, it's an exploration company. They'll continue with their mandate. However, there's a statistic that's not highly talked about. Majority of the exploration currently in Kenya is actually now being led by the private sector. In the past, it was fully led by Kengen. Yeah? As we speak right now, we've got 14 private companies that are doing geothermal exploration. Yeah? And these are from everywhere in the world. It's not just, so when you talked about the previous questions, is Kenya looking to partner up with the US? We're open for business. Yeah? Your last question is about the data centers. There's nothing more sweet to develop a data center than a green data center.
Yeah.
So now, geothermal is a very good source of green power. So Kenya right now, when you look at, there's an area called Naivasha. We're looking to scale up data center development. Yeah, already we've got companies like Google that is looking to do, actually Google and Microsoft are looking to develop data centers. And when you're looking at data centers for AI, we're able to build large power plants that are directly captive power plants for these data centers. So that's a key area of focus. And if there's anyone keen on investing on that, please reach out. We'll connect you to the right people within within the institutions in Kenya. Thanks.
Thanks, Ambassador. And we have a tool that we developed that's basically the Google Maps of subsurface heat. And a couple months ago, we put out a module looking at where are the best places globally to do geothermal data centers. And not surprisingly, that part of Kenya ranked very highly. So the data backs up with what you're saying, for what it's worth. Yep.
No, so we need to work much closer so that we can bring in more investors into Kenya.
All right.
Thank you.
Ibrani, I think we've got time for a couple more questions. This will probably be your last question. How is the Indonesian government working to attract foreign direct investment into geothermal while ensuring local content and benefit?
Yes. So first of all, I think in terms of attracting investment, of course, I forgot to add that in terms of geothermal, we as well provide work together with World Bank to provide the de-risking fund in terms of covering the costs or risk associated with exploration and production drilling. And the question about the local content requirement is something that has been going around not only in the geothermal sector, but as well in others. Actually, in our conversation with partners, we actually have tried to solve and able to solve a lot of these questions because we are able to sort of be flexible in terms of what we call local, and it can be translated into different ways, into sometimes, for example, development of human resources like we did with Apple, we did with GE Health. So I think moving forward, we are and always ready to be flexible on that. And the other thing is that we are in the process of liberalization ourselves. We just signed our accession to the OECD. And I think you can expect that with that accession, Indonesia is going to even more aggressive, more ambitious in reforming our regulatory regulatory framework, including in our discussion with US governments. And I think this is where the government-to-government talks is important, to provide a framework that is acceptable not only for the governments, but as well for the private business entities of both sides. And I think we have been involved in previous cases where we can solve those problems. We have regulations, but the regulations always have a sort of maybe like Swiss knife that you can go around and you can just create something in order to deliver a strategic interest together. I think this is where we can guarantee we are open for business. We're ready to invite, to work with US companies on this issue.
Great, thank you, Ibrani. Francesco, we've got 3 minutes left. I want to give everyone a chance to answer a one-word question. But before I do that, can you just briefly talk about the EU innovation in newer emerging states and through kind of what's happening? A lot of the Eastern European countries have some of the highest geothermal potential. Are there funding mechanisms? Are there strategies focused on bringing more geothermal there?
Yes, absolutely. Good question. Thank you. Yes. So our joint research center, which is an integral part of the European Commission, has calculated that across the entire EU territory, around 25% of district heating could be covered entirely by geothermal energy. This percentage goes up in Eastern Europe. And it's a fortunate coincidence in the sense that already Eastern Europe has all the infrastructure in terms of district heating systems that can already be converted to geothermal energy exploitation. So that's already a first good point. The point on financing is key to us. So geothermal energy being part of the Renewables Directive is already granted that all the firepower of not only the European Investment Bank, but all the Innovation Fund, Horizon Europe, all the research-based funds, and the climate funding that is channeled through European financial institutions can go 100% to cover not only CapEx, but in certain cases also OpEx of this system. So there is, in an ideal world, there will be no need for any public euros going into it, because we're not talking about a technology that has not been there for a long time. It's been there. We know that it has to be pushed. So we will do that through a policy signal in the first place, through our heating and cooling strategy. And there, we identify already a mechanism, financial mechanism for the private sector to invest in it. Because we know that we cannot, there are other areas where nascent markets need more public support. This is not one of those because there is already out there technology. American companies can convince us that they have to enter the market because they have the best technology in that, and we're open for business as well, as Ambassador said. We're also open for business from that perspective. But really, the involvement of the private sector is key, and we're doing that not only via the Renewables Directive and the European Investment Bank, but also via taxonomy. And that's just a reference for now, but happy to develop further.
Right. Well, I just got we're out of time notice here, but so I'm going to wrap up, but I'll just note that for if we do this ever again, Milo, this international panel should be titled "Open for Business," because that certainly seems to be the emerging theme. So I hope all of the entrepreneurs and startups in the room are paying attention to that. And if this were normal circumstances, I would take the moderator's privilege and just ask one more lightning round. But because IEA is next, and they're going to talk about their amazing report, I'm going to not take that privilege and give the time to Becky. But just want to thank you all for taking the time to talk about geothermal. And I hope you guys were as blown away by this panel as I was, because there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of enthusiasm, and now it's time to make it happen. So thank you all for participating.
I'll just project, we're thrilled to have closing remarks from Rebecca Schulz, the International Energy Agency Senior Analyst and Geothermal Lead. I could think of no better way than to round off a conference about the importance of unlocking global geothermal power than hearing from Rebecca. Thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Malo. And can you hear me okay? Okay. Otherwise, we can perhaps do it this way. Yeah, let's do it this way. I'm going to apologize to Drew because I'm not going to give us an overview of the Future of Geothermal Energy report. I highly encourage everyone to take a look at it. What I'm going to do first, though, is congratulate the team here at Carnegie Endowment. I mean, truly, this has been an amazing event. Thank you for your hospitality, for organizing this, and also congratulations on what is really an incredible report. So thank you all. What I'm going to do, instead of stepping through the Future of Geothermal Energy report in more detail, I wanted actually to step us back through the course of the last 5.5 hours or so, and capture at least some of the learnings that I heard. I also realized that I'm standing in between us and a cocktail reception, and so this is a very dangerous time and place to be in. My key learning and takeaway out of all of this, and there are so many from the entire room today, is really how much we're learning from one another. And especially in the US, look between the national labs and ARPA-E, back to companies, back to the Geothermal Technologies Office, amazing work, to Project InnerSpace, that's really been driving a lot of this work over the last few years as well, to the IEA. A lot of the work we're doing is because Project InnerSpace, asked the IEA to do work several years ago, and we had the opportunity. Over to Carnegie Endowment, back over to the Clean Air Task Force. Everyone is just building on top of each other, and the pace of learnings, of innovation that's happening in the field, and especially in the US, thanks in large part to Director Boyd and what her team has been doing, and the evolutions that we've seen at Forge and in Utah. And really stepping through perhaps our first panel, which was the next American drilling revolution. So my key takeaways, and we'll all have a few around the room. This is not your grandmother's geothermal or your grandfather's geothermal. So the resource potential that we have for geothermal globally at drilling depths that are very similar to what we already drill with oil and gas wells is about 300 terawatt hours. And that's about 60 times the level of global electricity used today. If you go down another kilometer, down to 8 kilometers, that doubles to 600. And so it is really a tremendous resource that we have literally sitting right beneath our feet. And a lot of that work has also been supported by work from Project InnerSpace and again from each other on the Geothermal Technologies Office. There is, as we heard from our companies that were on stage earlier today, there is actually quite a lot of capital, and as Director Boyd was showing earlier today, there's a lot of capital available for early stage. One of the challenges we need though is how do we get that over that hump when it comes to say a Series B and larger sizes? What do we need to be doing and putting in place in order to encourage that investment moving forward? And apologies, I was taking notes all day on my phone, so apologies as I run through these. But to take the next steps, it's really going to take that next level of collaboration and to a degree within the limits of intellectual property open sourcing. So whether that's open sourcing data, how do we share and learn from each other, or how do we actually learn from best practices with respect to policies or regulatory frameworks. Panel 2, so drilling deeper, and this is the long-term potential of super hot rock. So first, I think we all want to go and work on super hot rock in New Zealand. I think there's been a good sales case for that. And again, it's a focus on collaboration, except when it comes to between New Zealand and Iceland, and geothermal and I'd have to say New Zealand might win out on that one. Yeah. There is an evolution that's happening now, and it's happening tremendously quickly between the geothermal industry and oil and gas. They're similar industries, but they are not the same industry. And the oil and gas sector is separate, geothermal is separate, and there's a lot of crossover that can happen, but geothermal is going to take its own path, and it's going to be unique, and it's going to be fascinating to see how innovation transforms in that space. And looking around the room, the people that we have attending today, and how we can take these messages forward is going to be incredibly important to how we can actually build on each other's work and to spread the ability for geothermal to evolve and move ahead even faster, to really reach the potential that we've been talking about all day. But it really is going to take not just pushing the envelope, but we need to also reshape the narrative on geothermal. So that was one of the big takeaways that I had from the second panel as well. And then panel 3, as Drew said, it's the panel open for business. Really impressive. Between Kenya and Indonesia, walking the talk, we have a lot to learn. But congratulations to both on the leadership that they have in the geothermal space. It's really incredible. And also with Indonesia's succession to the OECD, bringing on the Sovereign Wealth Fund, there is so much potential there. And in Kenya as well, they are open for business. But what we can do in looking at the policy learnings, so it's sharing of data, regulatory frameworks, government signaling. So important for Kenya, for example, to be supporting those early stages at 49%. And then also focus on de-risking. And there's not, as we heard from Francesco, there's not another technology that has more bipartisan support. So we heard that in the EU, we've heard that here in the US. It is really, other perhaps in some spaces than nuclear, it is really an incredibly unique technology in that aspect. So EU will be doing a heating and cooling strategy for the end of this year, beginning of next year, under the new leadership. But it's really the heating and cooling sector where we have a tremendous amount of low-hanging fruit in the EU. And so if you look, I've seen the maps. If you look at where we use heating in buildings in the building sector, and you take a look at where we have carbon emissions from those same sectors, and then you overlap with the work on geothermal potential, it pops right out at you. So there's a tremendous opportunity that we have in and across the EU. We see Germany moving the needle, so an amazing series of geothermal projects. Absolutely incredible. I was astounded. Not quite ready to frack yet. No, just kidding. But it may be the home of innovation for closed-loop technology in particular. And so it's going to be really fascinating to see on the district heating and cooling side in Germany and also on closed-loop what we see come out. And Italy, maybe fracking is not that bad. And if you need a geothermal turbine, we know where to go. So a huge thank you to all of you. And I'm very, very keen to hear what you have all learned today. I hope we've had a great time. I don't want to take any more of your time before the cocktail hour, but just a huge thanks to everyone that has dedicated their afternoon, their day, their prep time over the last few days and weeks for this. Have a great evening and hope to see you again here sometime soon.